I just gotta say what I said from the beginning, and this is not me at all being like, told you so, because I also was like, well, this is up to the people of Maine. This is up to them. But we should have higher standards for left candidates. You know, just like starting off there, having higher standards, getting rid of this idea that we need scruffy, gruffy white men, grizzled white men to represent the working class. That no matter the background of said white men, as long as they fit an aesthetic, then, and if they are saying the right things about class politics as far as taking on the billionaires, right? Talking about economic exploitation, then nothing else matters. And anybody who suggests otherwise is a fool at best and a wrecker at worst. Saw you in Sean's chat earlier. Yeah, I did pop in there. And drop a couple thoughts. Shout out to Sean and others who have been from the get-go putting their foot down on this. And it's unfortunate that a lot of other leftists who did not even bother applying any like nuance to this discussion. It was just absolutely no would not entertain any criticisms at all. Just hand waving everything away. And then coming after anybody who did have issues, who were like, well, hold on a second. Before we get too into this thing, who is this person? What was the vetting process here? Are we sure this is who we want representing the left, right? Are these the kind of candidates that we want to be forming behind without questioning some pretty obvious already red flags? Like, that was the thing, is that I think what frustrated a lot of us was seeing way too many leftists not being concerned at all. And so this idea that all of this stuff has now come out and now it's damning and we didn't know these things and we needed better vetting, yada, yada. It's like, okay, but we did know about his multiple tours, which, okay, then we can have the conversation around, you know, rehabilitation. But that was not it. In 2018, when he was in his 30s, he worked as a mercenary for the company that was previously Blackwater. Like, hold on a second. Now, that's a different story than being young and brainwashed into like signing up for the military. Now, hold on a second. And just a lot of other things speaking to the character of this person that now you can absolutely draw this through line. As I said in Sean's chat, I was like, it's actually not surprising that a person who worked as a mercenary, who did God knows what in Iraq and Afghanistan, but God knows it wasn't anything good, turns out to be a sexual abuser. Like, yeah, there are parallels in the character traits there in who this person is. These people are defending themselves and their interests. And I think what's happened particularly with a lot of white American leftists is this total class reductionist approach that actually calls into question their own supposed principled stances, where they ignore everything else because they treat it as a distraction, when the reality is that we can't and should not treat these things as distractions when they are overlapping systems of oppression. That, let's be honest, some like a white working class DSA person living in New York City does not have the same experience, same lived experience as a person living in Kabul who has been victim to American imperialist activities their entire lives, or somebody, a black or brown immigrant living in the United States of America who experiences multiple intersections of oppression, not just related to their material conditions. So there is this constant emphasis on the focus on material conditions to awake a class consciousness. Okay, right? Economic exploitation, capitalism as an economic, but also cultural force that pits the working class against the ruling class. And we have to stay focused on our enemy being the billionaires and corporate powers of this world who exploit labor, and it moves from the bottom to the top, all of that. But there is this continuing issue, this growing problem with ignoring intersectionality, because intersectionality now is considered by leftists of this certain type of leftist to be like hollow identity politics, like, neoliberal id pol that is a distraction from class politics, and so thus serves the interests of the ruling class. And it's like, hey, I actually think we need to have both of these things. I think we need to approach class politics, right? I think we need to approach the fight against economic exploitation by having an intersectional approach, by recognizing that we can't ignore different lived experiences of the working class, because that is ignoring reality and how these systems work together, that patriarchy and capitalism work together. Capitalism benefits from patriarchy, and the current form of patriarchy absolutely is, formed around the capitalist stage we are in. And yet it's like, you'll have people, like, folks will go, okay, yeah, sure, but then still not adopt that into their framework. It still is like a perpetuating of rape culture, of misogyny and sexism, of perfect victim mythology, because how dare anything get in the way of a candidate who is not a Republican. Classism, racism, ableism, sexism all need to be addressed, dismantled, because they feed off each other and intertwine to make each stronger. And what we have to remember is, like, these oppressions are used by the ruling class to divide the working class. Okay? That's the hierarchies that are created within the working class. So it distracts people away from their shared material reality, from their shared common enemy, because of these bigotries and biases that then are exploited by the ruling class to keep us all divided. So if we ignore it, if we go, that's a distraction away from no war but class war, class only, then we are also aiding the ruling class, because you cannot build a broad coalition by ignoring all of these different lived experiences. You can't. Because how do you think, like, right now, people who have been a victim of sexual abuse, right, of sexual assault, who have been victims under a patriarchal rape society, looking at leftists going, these are all fake. These are all smears. This is just a distraction. This is just yet another lie. Like everything else is a lie. because Graham Platner is a threat to the establishment. It's like, how do you think people feel looking at that and going, I'm sorry, I'm supposed to be in the same movement as y'all? We're supposed to be a coalition here. This is the broad coalition of the working class where we're supposed to sacrifice our own selves for the prioritizing of white male rapists. They're like, come on. So many people's first reactions to say, well, Trump's a rapist, so why can't we elect a rapist? Yeah, we got to stop doing that. Okay, we really got to fucking stop doing that. Yeah, Trump is a rapist. Okay. Do you understand that what you're saying then is leftists should be allowed to rape because Trump is a rapist? That's doing rape apologia. Hello. Let me take a look at what or show people what we're talking about here in case they aren't aware and they're being left out of the conversation here because they're not aware of what happened today. So let me pull up. Also, I thought I had seen something on him dropping out, but I guess that's not happened yet. Okay.
Start with breaking news.
Willow, thank you for the 4 months.
Could impact the midterm elections. Maine Democratic Senate candidate Graham Platner is facing new accusations of sexual assault. Politico reports that a woman Platner dated claims he forced her to have sex against her will. In an interview with CNN's Jake Tapper, the accuser says Platner came over to her house uninvited in 2021 and then forced himself on her despite her objections.
Heavily intoxicated, and that blank stare was kind of like a photographic memory that I still have of that night. And that was me recognizing what the situation was. And this wasn't just like, oh, hey, somebody showed up and I'm going to tell him to go home. Like, he was heavily intoxicated, had intentions with me, and wasn't listening when I said no.
Platner denies the report and says he is taking time to decide what comes next.
Any accusation of non-consensual.
Okay, wait, actually, let me pull up. This is her.
The people involved.
This is the full interview here on CNN. So this story came out in Politico today. And it is about this woman who had previously been mentioned in the New York Times piece, but did not go into full detail of her experience with Platner. Just said that, had just said that, yeah, something, unsettling had happened, but she was not going to go into further detail. Well, finally she has. And the story that was reported today is that she had dated Graham Platner on and off for about 2 years and then has alleged that he sexually assaulted her. So her name is Jenny Rassicott. She is a 41-year-old Maine resident, and she detailed the alleged incident to Politico in 3 interviews over the past 2 weeks. Politico spoke with a man that she had dated and confided in the years after the alleged incident, reviewed documents, including emails between Rassicott and her therapist and messages between her and an acquaintance whom she warned against getting involved with Platner years before he ran for office. So she said that he entered her rural Maine home uninvited one night in late 2021, deeply intoxicated, and forced himself on her while she repeatedly told him to stop. She said she cut off contact with him after telling him the encounter was not consensual. I remember him grabbing my pelvis, being really forceful of me. I remember the specific moment where I thought to myself, like, this is no longer my choice. Platner has denied the allegations. We will look at his fucking response. Said that they are troubling, serious, false, categorically untrue. And the reason she says she didn't go public with the specific assault claim was because she didn't want to be known as a rape victim. And this is a common feeling with people who have been victims of rape, where they, especially if they are accusing somebody who is a public figure, whether they are a famous celebrity in Hollywood, whether they are a politician, they have to contend with the reality that for the rest of their lives, they will be attached to this claim. They will be known as the person who alleged rape against so-and-so, that becomes their identity. And it can have very serious consequences from the personal to the professional. And that is the unfortunate, horrific reality of living in a culture that still is so problematic in regards to the way that we treat victims versus those who abuse. And so her not wanting to go public because she didn't want to be known as a rape victim is something that is experienced by a lot of people who are in similar positions as this. But she felt compelled to go public about her experience because the reaction to the Times story was dominated by controversy about another woman, Lindsay Fifield, who alleged Platner mistreated her and faced attacks because of her ties to the Republican Party. My part of the story was just a read over, and the story was Lindsay and the accusations of her being politically motivated. Resicott said she was torn over coming forward in part because she agrees with Platner politically. And this is another aspect of this is another problematic aspect that I have seen in the way that people, depending on their politics, will treat allegations of rape. And it needs to be understood that, yes, allegations need credibility, or else they are allegations with nowhere to go and can invite in a lot of skepticism. And also, yes, sometimes there are political motivations for why something is done or the way that it's done. But what this has turned into is essentially a very black and white view of when do I believe somebody and when do I not? Not even having to do with like how credible allegations are, but having to do with the person who's making the allegations. And oftentimes it feeds into the perfect victim mythology of, well, this person is a bad person, so therefore nothing they say just on that, just on that alone is ever going to be true, and they have ill intent, and that is why they are saying what they say, versus, well, this person I have decided is a good person, is someone who I will choose to believe, and therefore that gives credibility to what they are saying. And I saw a lot of people try and point out the obvious motivations here of the establishment machine, which, yes, of course, the liberal media machine is incentivized to make sure that these candidates who keep popping up that are a threat to the establishment, that they try and stop them before they win power. Of course, people like Democratic Party officials, establishment Dems, the liberal media machine, we have seen go after a lot of these candidates. We've seen them go after Abdul al-Sayed. We've seen them go after the many DSA candidates in New York. We've seen them go after Zohar Mamdani. But I do think it's telling, though, that with as much as they have tried, they've had nothing on these other people. Versus Graham Platner, there were already so many red flags and very, very questionable things that did not require the media machine to like nonstop be going after him and try to dig things up. Also, whether voters dismiss or don't care about that as well, sadly. Yeah. And people will do the thing that they accuse other people of doing, which is to dismiss without further thought allegations, depending on the political stances of the person who is making them. And like I said, there are, of course, instances where absolutely political motivations need to be taken under account because of the purpose of, say, spreading rape hoaxes in order to manufacture consent for genocide. But that is not something that should be willy-nilly applied, seen as like the case every single time when somebody who is accusing someone else of sexual abuse has different politics from them. Platner also had disgusting comments about sexual assault before the New York Times article. Yes, a lot of red flags. Yes. The thing is that people with different politics from you absolutely can be and have been victims of rape. That needs to be remembered. Just as there can be political motivations behind behind those who are jumping on a story and pushing it forward, not because they care about what's contained in the details, but because of what they view the, how they see inability to weaponize it politically. I want to personally thank you for being a literal terrorist while still being privileged to live in USA. Do you know what the word literal means? I don't think you do. And unfortunately, it's a word that very stupid people use all the time when they are actually wrong in using the word literal because they don't know what the word literal means. A literal terrorist. Literal means exactly. Goodbye. I can literally... You are literally a terrorist. Oh, that's news to me. Thank you. Also, was that in response to talking about Platner? I'm a terrorist? Okay. Caroline Kwan, can we also discuss the disgusting, callous manner in which Jake Tapper operated in the interview with the accuser? He asked the same thing like 5 times and literally asked her to walk us through the process where you decided that the safest thing you could do. Yeah, let's let us get to that. Sorry, I just wanted to give some of the details here, some of the background for people who missed this. So she said one of the reasons I didn't come forward sooner was the huge moral conflict that I had between supporting his politics but not supporting him as a person. The Iraq and Afghanistan war veteran has linked some of his behavior to mental health struggles and alcohol abuse. But he says he's changed and has denied previous claims that he was abusive to women. And remember, one thing that our society loves is giving redemption to men who claim that they have changed, but haven't necessarily shown the proof of that, but also do not want to take accountability for past behaviors. Just the act of offering redemption to men, especially men, especially white men, men who have status of some sort.
You described your relationship with Graham Platner as a very good example of what modern dating
Hannah,
is
thank you
like.
for the 20 months.
Yeah.
Willow,
What do you
thank
mean
you
by
for the
that?
4.
What I mean by that is that, I think there's a lot of situationships. I think people are dating multiple people at the same time, whether that's known or not known by the people involved. So it was just a very common practice is what I viewed it as.
And kind of casual.
Yeah, very casual.
And when did you meet him and how did you meet him?
Met him on Bumble actually in 2019. And I had known who he was. He grew up in the next town over. We had like a mutual family friend, so I always knew of his existence, but that was when we actually met.
And what did you think of him?
At first I thought he was great. He's very well spoken.
I do hate that it's Jake Tapper doing this interview.
He's intelligent, he's charming. I thought a lot of good things. We had a great first date. It went and flowed really well.
He has described himself as self-medicating with alcohol.
Yeah.
He has described himself.
Also, I just have to say, like, it really is telling how rape and other claims of sexual abuse are only are a conversation that people are participating in, right? That they're paying attention to when it involves political figures, but not ones in popular culture outside of politics, and namely talking about in celebrity cases, and namely talking about her Depp. Because I will never, ever stop talking about the fact that Depp Heard was a major catalyst, and it revealed a lot of leftist blind spots. It revealed how insidious misogyny and sexism is across the political spectrum. And it showed that despite having progressive politics, despite having like a leftist view on the necessary changes that need to be made to our society, right? A reorganizing of these structures, that there is still this participation in rape culture, which is deeply linked to capitalism. So you cannot talk about dismantling capitalist structures while still participating in patriarchal rape culture. You can't.
Yeah.
So I would think maybe that would have reared its head.
Yeah. And
You are so right. I was one of the men who had to face the mirror, but at least you did. My issue is not with people who fall for a smear campaign or who aren't immediately aware of how their blind spots are getting in the way of their understanding of an issue. It's when confronted on that, a refusal to like acknowledge being wrong, a refusal to acknowledge having blind spots, like a continued participation without any stopping to reflect upon anything, like having no room for reflection, having no ability to listen to other perspectives, other voices, and go, oh, mayhaps I was wrong on this issue because I, like many others, had a very peripheral understanding that was fed by already existing biases, right? Like it fed into these notions I already held. And that was why I so easily believed this. And there was such overwhelming public support for Johnny Depp, even people who didn't purported to not care about the case aren't Johnny Depp stans. And that was a result of the media machine. That was a result of the bot farms. That was a result of, everything that the PR team deployed and also a result of existing misogyny in our society. And a lot of leftists who will look at a woman who is of economic, has economic privilege because she is in a higher class and has more money than the average person and go, I don't care what happens to that person because my approach to systemic change is very narrow.
And unfortunately, that's something that I think a lot of people are desensitized to in general, heavy drinking, and especially out of the relationship that I had just come out of. So it wasn't anything abnormal to me.
There needs to be a reckoning if no one acknowledges their misjudgment. Why they made so many excuses, then what will we learn? Nothing. I'm not seeing much self-reflection beyond, okay, I don't support them any longer. Without self-reflection, there can be no real change. Without self-reflection, we just go through this again. And we've seen, like, how many fucking smear campaigns? How many smear campaigns are we going to go through before we have some goddamn reckoning? How many times? People were still doing apologia in the name of electoralism today. Yes. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people who still do not view sexual violence as a serious issue to contend with. And they do not see the intersections, or they do not place value in having an intersectional approach. Like, already when I tweeted about it, I had responses that were like, oh, here we go with the blah, 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 blah intersection. I'm like, what do you mean, here we go? You think like this is just performative idpol talking about the realities of racism and sexism and transphobia, right? In particular, DVH partly enabled the current ecosystem of slop and misogyny content online, where you just get online and lie and run with smears and out of context clips and exploit what people don't know. It's very frustrating how people say they don't have a dog in the fight as if they aren't now being affected by the ecosystem. Yes. And I know I've said it 1,000 times, but I always point to the fact that Asmongold is doing what he's doing today because he had so much success during the Depp versus Heard trial, that he found a massive audience for his reactionary slop. And so he realized that there was a lot of value for him to continue doing this kind of content online.
Remember, we were out one night and he was drinking, and that's when he told me that he has PTSD.
When the New York Times story came out, you were in it, but you didn't go as far in that story as you are today.
Yeah.
Why not?
I didn't want to. I didn't want to have to violate this huge level of privacy to my own life to be able to infer that this person is not honest and trustworthy. I felt really protective of my own privacy throughout this whole process. And it got to a point where my privacy was no longer going to happen. And that was when I kind of just made the decision that, like, I'm going to say my piece and get it out there. I had tried to give the impression that something, worse happened.
Thank you, Tavia.
And that's when it was like, I refused to comment further.
You definitely alluded to a bad night.
Yeah.
So bad that you never saw him again afterwards.
Yeah.
But just to underline the point, you're not coming forward because you have any political motivation.
Chauvinism has to be rejected. Reactionary populism has to be rejected. We must reclaim the ideological argument and be principled socialists. White supremacy, patriarchy, and settler colonialism all have to be resisted against. Yeah. And nobody is asking for perfection because none of us are perfect. But if we are not actively trying to resist, and if we are not calling into the conversation all of these overlapping forms of oppression that, yes, are connected to an economically exploitative system, then we are fucked. That's it.
No, not at all. That was actually one of the huge reasons that I didn't come forward and still struggled. Like, that was a huge moral conflict to feel like.
Because you'd like a Democrat to be in the Senate.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the things that he speaks about. They're important. They're important too.
Yeah, in the same way that the victims of Cesar Chavez felt that they couldn't say anything because of how important he was to the movement. And also that they would be dismissed because they are not important. And so they held on to that pain for the entirety of their lives, long after he had died, because of not wanting to get in the way. And that not coming from just an individual sense, you know, their own individual beliefs, but because of what society, how society conditions us. When in fact they were the most important, they were doing the work. Yes. We were asked to sacrifice so much of ourselves.
People, I'm one of those people.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you feel he's not being honest.
He's not being honest, no.
And we should note, this is 2021 we're talking about. It's only 5 years ago. Tell me about that. When was it?
It was at the end of 2021. I remember it being shortly after I moved back into my winter home, because that is where it happened. And it was a night where him and I were texting back and forth, and he had taken something that I said as an invitation. And that's not how I meant it. And I quickly clarified. And he sent a message back indicating that he would come over. And I said, no, don't come over. Like, I'm not in the mood. Don't come over. And I was more stern with that message. And then I didn't hear back from him. So I thought that that meant he got the message or gave up on it or whatnot. And so like half an hour later, I heard a noise outside my door. And then he came in. He just came into my house. It was unlocked. I live in an area where you don't usually have to lock your doors. I do now. So he came in and I realized, okay, he didn't listen. He's in my home. And I was laying on the couch. It was probably pretty late at night and I was already ready for bed. I just wasn't in bed. And so he had kind of like jumped on top of me and indicated that he had intentions that were sexual in nature. And I remember just at first being like, hey, I'm not into this. Like, I'm not in the mood. Like, don't, whatever. And it got to the point where I was like, okay, I feel like I've said this enough times. Like, he's not listening to me or he's not hearing me. And I looked at him and I remember this very specific look in his eyes. And I could smell alcohol and I was like, this is different. He is heavily intoxicated. Like, and that blank stare was kind of like a photographic memory that I still have of that night. And his, that was me recognizing what the situation was. And this wasn't just like, oh, hey, somebody showed up and I'm going to tell him to go home. Like, he was heavily intoxicated, had intentions with me, and wasn't listening when I said no. And
you were saying no.
Why is this audio? Is this something on my end or is this like
the people involved?
Hold on.
And he sent a message back indicating that he would come over. And I said, no. Okay, he didn't listen. He's in my home. And
It's just a
I was laying on the couch.
classic dog shit CNN audio.
It was probably pretty late at night and I was already ready for bed. I just wasn't in bed. And so he had kind of like jumped on top of me and indicated that he had intentions that were sexual in nature. And I remember just at first being like, hey, I'm not into this. Like, I'm not in the mood. Like, don't, whatever. And it got to the point where I was like, okay, I feel like I've said this enough times. Like, he's not listening to me or he's not hearing me. And I looked at him and I remember this very specific look in his eyes. And I could smell alcohol and I was like, this is different. He is heavily intoxicated. Like, and that blank stare was kind of like a photographic memory that I still have of that night. And his, that was me recognizing what the situation was. And this wasn't just like, oh, hey, somebody showed up and I'm going to tell him to go home. Like, he was heavily intoxicated, had intentions with me, and wasn't listening when I said no. And
you were saying, no, don't, over and over and over.
I remember, you know, obviously I've had to recall a lot of this. This is something that I tried for many years to forget. And so small details, you know, might get past me. But yes, I remember very specifically saying, I'm not into this. In my message previously, I told him I had had an old back injury. And I remember saying, like, I'm not in this. I've had a long day. My back hurts. Like I was in
Yeah, Jake Taffer's just asking the important questions.
that kind of mood, like the leave me alone mood. And there was a little bit of like scuffle, like altercation. The house that I live in has like this antique sewing kit that I kept beside the couch, and that got knocked over. He like backed into it, or something was maybe pushed into it by me, or something happened in that moment, and that thing got spilled. And
do you remember pushing him away?
I remember potentially pushing away with my legs, like, and then as he backed into it, it spilt, and all of the sewing needles and tape and yarn and everything went everywhere. Everything had fallen onto the floor, and in that moment, I evaluated my safety. Like, a drunk person who's blackout drunk is in my home, has these intentions with me, you know, has already caused this amount of destruction and not listening to me. And so I basically felt safe as just complying.
You normally use protection.
Yeah.
And this time he didn't.
No.
And you didn't want that.
No.
And he didn't care.
No, I don't think my words were falling on deaf ears or drunk ears.
Okay.
And you were still saying, don't do this, or I'm not into this?
I remember specifically him like grabbing at my chest, and I like hit his hand and I said, don't touch me. And I remember that during the altercation.
And
specifically.
then he kept going.
Yeah, and it was this weird mix of like coming in and out of, I don't think consciousness is the word, but like coming to and kind of falling back into that drunken, I don't know what I'm doing state. And yeah, and he would apologize in those moments and then go back to doing what he was doing.
So he was aware that he was doing something wrong.
Yeah.
And saying sorry.
I feel like he was in moments.
Is there any way that he thought this was consensual, or no?
Oh
Just
my
because
God.
I don't believe that you can think that that scenario was consensual. You have to understand that wasn't, when somebody is repeatedly, I mean, when somebody.
Man, just the way that Tapper in this line of questioning is reinforcing rape culture. That's what these questions are.
In the middle of it says, don't touch me. Like, that's obviously not consensual.
Especially if he's apologizing on occasion.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't matter if he's saying sorry or not. From the get-go, a lack of enthusiastic consent means no. That's it. There is no consent.
Yeah. And that next morning.
It doesn't matter the state of Graham Platner's mind, being aware or not, saying sorry or not, thinking it's consensual or not.
So after everything ended, I ran to the bathroom, which is just beside my bedroom. And I was in there for a while and just trying to like comprehend things. Like,
Were you crying? Were you?
I honestly don't think I was crying. I was like more in shock and yeah, just trying to understand like what had just happened. Especially like this is a person I have known and have trusted and have had very consensual relationships with, like, you know, all along until it wasn't. And so that was a really hard thing to understand, that this was a person I trusted. And so I spent a little bit of time in the bathroom, and when I came back out, he was asleep in my bed. And at that point, I didn't know what my options were. Like, obviously, I don't want this person in my house. And when I, you know, earlier had realized how drunk he was, I knew that he had driven over that way. Like, I'm surprised he made it to my house. And if I woke him up and sent him home, like, I am now making the decision to put somebody that drunk on the road. And I didn't want to live with the fact that, like, if he got into an accident or hurt somebody else. And I remember thinking that I could tell him to leave, and I could call the police immediately, and I could at least get him caught for drunk driving. So
Yeah, also you don't have to cry for it to be rape.
I was like, I'm gonna let him sleep, and the second he wakes up, I'm gonna tell him to leave. And so he slept. I lay there in like a state of panic all night, and I remember turning on, I have like one of those noise machines that you sleep with, and I turn it on ocean waves, and I'm like, I'll just try to meditate.
You don't need to call the police. You don't need to recognize that in that moment that what happened to you was rape for it to be rape. Like, all of these specificities are all aspects that are perpetuated by rape culture. Why didn't you call the police? Why didn't you do something right then and there? Why didn't you this? Like, all of that, putting the onus still on the victim of the assault.
It didn't work. So in the morning, he woke up and he went to go put his arm around me. And I was like, whoa. And realizing this person doesn't know that what happened wasn't okay. And so I remember taking his arm and throwing it back at him. And I said, are you fucking serious, Graham? And he's like, what?
Also, Sarah, thank you for the raid. I don't remember if I said thank you, but thank you for the raid.
And I'm like, do you not remember what happened last night? He's like, no. And I'm like, okay, I need you to get dressed and leave and never talk to me again. Like, nothing that happened was okay. And he did. He just got up and got dressed and left and didn't seem concerned.
We start with breaking news that
She said she waited several weeks till she got her period to ensure she wasn't pregnant, then sent Platner a private message on Instagram saying that the encounter was not consensual and she did not want to hear from him ever again. Rassicot had no further contact with him after that, she said. Later deleted all her texts and social media correspondence with Platner as she tried to move on from the assault, and said she has not been able to recover the Instagram messages she sent him about the incident. In the weeks after the alleged assault, Rassicot said she considered going to the police but struggled with shock and confusion about what had happened to her and did not file a police report. Even as time passed, she said she felt uncomfortable potentially telling a police officer about such a personal experience and feared retaliation from Platner. At first, she confided only in her therapist, who she continues to see. Rassicot showed political recent emails with her therapist in which she explained she was talking to the media about her relationship with Platner and the sexual assault and rape, using an abbreviation for sexual assault. In the message, Rassicot said she was not ready to go public and was seeking help corroborating her account and conversations she was having with reporters on condition of anonymity. Her therapist responded that Rassicot shouldn't have to speak publicly about a traumatic incident in order to be believed without referencing details of any particular incident. And the fact that she also is aware of the need for corroborating accounts, right? Any type of evidence, because of how immediately people are inclined to will be inclined to disbelieve her. Her therapist responded, the therapist who Politico agreed not to name at her request declined to comment when reached on Monday. Resicott also shared details about the alleged assault to the man she dated after Platner, who she began dating in 2022. The man, who was granted anonymity out of concern for his personal privacy, told Politico that Resicott had told him in bits and pieces about a bad experience with Platner before confiding the full details of what had happened in 2023. His account of what Resicott told him about the incident matched what she had told Politico. Has Platner dropped out yet? I thought I had seen something on it, but seems not to be the case yet. Although a lot of people who have endorsed him or were supporting him are calling on him to step down. Resicott shared with Politico a series of private Facebook messages she exchanged with an acquaintance in 2023, about a year and a half after the alleged assault and well before Platner launched his political career. She cautioned the acquaintance against getting involved with Platner. In the messages, Resicott said she had ended up in a bad situation with him, describing him as consensually careless and saying that he doesn't listen to you when drunk. Reached by Politico, the acquaintance said she received the messages but declined to comment. Politico granted her anonymity at her request to protect her privacy in her Maine community. She said, I feel morally obligated to warn you if you were anything more than just friends with Graham, but if you're not, then I'll just shut up for now and give you the scoop sometime. Just friends would love the scoop, though. Is he still engaged? I was working on fixing up a friend. Oh, I have no idea. Politico also spoke with a friend that Resicott had told about the alleged assault last summer, shortly after Platner launched his campaign. The friend, to whom Politico granted anonymity due to fear of social and professional backlash, recalled Resicott telling her about the incident, including that Platner had been very drunk and wouldn't take no for an answer. Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of times when somebody is a victim of assault, they have nothing other than their own understanding of the experience, their own memories of the experience. Because what assault can do to your body can result in a lot of different things where people do not tell other people, because saying something out loud then makes it more real. People can go into survival mode where they bury it down deep, and then 20 years later that surfaces and they realize what had happened 20 years previous. That they do not go to the police for many reasons. One being that the police so often are truly terrible and make a situation worse and are not equipped to handle claims of sexual assault. And in some cases, it gets turned back around on the victims when they go to the police to make a report. And then the accused ends up turning it around on the victim, and they have found themselves then in legal trouble. As a man, I went to the police as a boy when it happened to me and it was dismissed. Yes, that is that is how the system frequently operates, which is why there is this understanding that the police won't do anything and can make it worse. So people will then decide, what's the point of going to the police? They'll decide to not go because they'll say, what's the point of going? After the publication of the Times report, Resicott connected with Cheyenne Hunt, a progressive Democratic lawyer who founded the nonprofit Reckoning Action, which launched earlier this year to fight misogyny. Hunt, who had endorsed Platner last fall but renounced her support of him after the Times article, previously supported women who came forward with assault allegations against former Rep. Eric Swalwell, prompting him to drop out of the California gubernatorial primary and resign from Congress. NBC News previously reported that Hunt was working with multiple women who had past relationships with Platner. Reckoning Action exists to confront misogyny in American life in all forms and manifestations, including in bad actors being elected to positions of power. We became aware of allegations before ever being connected with Jenny and have been in contact with multiple women with really troubling allegations, and it just became clear that this is someone who's not fit to hold public office. After the Times report last month, Platner had said that allegations of physical misconduct were simply not true, and his allies seized on Fifield's conservative political affiliations to suggest that her allegations against him in the Times article were motivated by politics. On MS Now last month, after the Times report, Platner denied claims that he had physically mistreated women. Anything alleging physicality, anything alleging that I knew what my tattoo was, these are the statements of somebody who's politically motivated, alluding to unrelated allegations about a tattoo resembling a Nazi symbol. Platner had the tattoo resembling a Nazi symbol covered up last fall and said he had not known what the symbol meant. Rassicot said she was bothered by Platner's public denial that he had been physical towards women. I know that he is capable of putting his hands on women, so I don't believe that to be the truth. I mean, this is somebody who has bragged about his exploits in Iraq and Afghanistan. This is a person who has previously been so chauvinistic about his imperial violence over in the Middle East. This is a person who has just had many red flags stacking one on top of another. So, yes, I think the characterization of Graham Platner as abusive and violent seems to be consistent with his background.
Non-consensual behavior.
Here's his.
I wanted to directly address the troubling, serious, and false allegations against me. Any accusation of non-consensual behavior
Modi, thank you for the
is
3 months.
categorically
Biodrummer, thank you for
false.
16.
Over the last 10 months, I have been deeply humbled by the faith Mainers have put in me. You have welcomed me into your homes, into your places of work, into your restaurants, into your houses of worship. You have shown that a different kind of politics, one that puts the interests of people over corporations.
I think, too, there needs to be a reckoning with why leftists did not have a problem with, in particular, his mercenary work, but now draw the line with the rape claims of a woman who aligns, a white woman who aligns politically with Graham Platner. And that is obviously not a knock at all on Rassicot. That is a need to contend with the fact that leftists will claim to be allies of the, of black and brown folks, and then turn around and participate in still their dehumanization, where their lives don't matter enough to even give pause, right? There was not even a pause of, okay, so sure, Graham Platner as a political candidate with his platform is better than Susan Collins. Susan Collins, who of course has participated in the, in genocides and in multiple imperial wars with the votes that she has made in Congress, but that there was a refusal to listen to black and brown voices talking about how they are all too familiar with somebody like Graham Platner and the type of person that he is. I got annihilated in permaban for saying it shouldn't have taken rape for him to be seen as unviable. This speaks to the issue of still white supremacy, of racism on the left, as it speaks to sexism and misogyny, as it speaks to these bigotries and these chauvinistic tendencies existing across the political spectrum. About who gets a pass. Do you understand why people like Zoran Mamdani and Abdul Al-Sayed have to be as squeaky clean as they come? Because they are already having to contend with the fact that they are Muslim men who are running for political office in a deeply Islamophobic state. That there cannot be a single thing to tie them to any type of controversy because of the systems of oppression that they have experienced their entire lives. So seeing seeing a person like Graham Platner not be held to the same standards and be pushed through as his background and his former work had just been hand waved away because he's a rugged white working class dude who is important to be the face here of the movement in Maine. Too many men want the camaraderie and communal validation being on the left can bring as a balm for the alienation they feel, but don't want to do the work of actually reflecting deeply about their ingrained misogyny, racism, American exceptionalism, other undeniable biases. They're like, come on, don't spoil the vibe. Right. Where they talk about capitalism, but they don't talk about, they talk about all these other forms of oppression as just byproducts of capitalism, if even that. Like they won't deny racism necessarily, or won't deny sexism necessarily, but they view that as so secondary to the fight against capitalism that anybody whose lived experience reflects these additional forms of oppression that are also tied to their material reality, they get called wreckers. Their experiences are just completely dismissed.
Is not just possible, but is inevitable. This movement we have built, the largest volunteer base in the history of Maine politics, the hundreds of thousands of grassroots
Chris Rabb literally called this double standard out and he got called a lib for that shit.
donors and the supporters across the ideological spectrum, we were united in a love of Maine, a belief that our politics must change, and a focus on defeating Susan Collins. So, regardless of the inaccuracy of the
See what he said right there? Sorry.
and the supporters across the ideological spectrum, we were united in a love of Maine, a belief that our politics must change, and a focus on defeating Susan Collins. So, regardless of the inaccuracy.
And the thing is that this continued focus on, well, Susan Collins is bad. We got to get Susan Collins out. Yeah, absolutely. But you know who's used the same argument and then leftists will correctly identify it as not sufficient are liberals when they say Orange Man bad. So we need to get Orange Man out. And that is the only focus we need to maintain, right? The Kamala Harris method. Now, Kamala Harris and Graham Platner, as far as candidates go, different candidates, yes, but still applying this narrow focus of nothing else matters except for defeating this person, then when things pop up that do matter, that at the very least require a real look at the types of candidates that we are putting up to challenge these terrible individuals or to challenge the entire system, then nope, that doesn't matter.
Of the reporting, but mindful of the political reality it will inflict. We are taking the time to reflect on the best path forward for the state that I love, the people that I love, the movement I belong to, and the goal of defeating Susan Collins. Those were the goals when we launched this campaign, and they remain my goals today. On June 9th, 154,058 Mainers, the most in primary history, voted to reject a broken politics beholden to what?
And the fact, too, that this motherfucker kept going, that there should have been from the beginning, if this person, let me just say this, okay? If he truly cares about defeating Susan Collins, if he truly cares about this broad working class coalition to challenge a deeply exploitative system that benefits the ruling bourgeoisie, billionaire class over the working class, then he never should have been the person who fucking ran. There was somebody else. They could have found somebody else because he has so much in his history, so much. And the fact that at every step it was like, nope, there's nothing else. Nope, there's nothing else. That is on him. Okay? So before anyone's like, well, I wish that his accuser had come forward sooner. Again, you're still putting the onus on his victim. What about Graham Platner? What about the arrogance of this person to go, no. Who cares? Because I'm saying the right things now for voters who are ready to get rid of Susan Collins. He should have never run in the first place because that speaks to this man's ego, his narcissism, his privilege of going, no, people will have to support me still. They'll have to support me still because the alternative is what? Susan Collins?
Not any of the other stuff. We should have held this standard months ago. And I've been saying that we should have held this standard months ago. Months ago. And months of me yelling, like being yelled at and being attacked and being accosted because I had the audacity, right, to stand against the common tide of people pushing for Graham Platner. You should have heard Blackwater and said no, right? Because if you would have heard IDF, you would have said no, right? You should have heard Blackwater, you should have said no immediately, frame one. But we heard Blackwater, we were like, well, how much Blackwater, right? When Blackwater?
And now part of me though is like, had it been the IDF, would there still have been the, okay, but that was in the past. He's reformed. He's obviously running on an anti-war, anti-Israel platform now.
Washington and the donor class. They voted for hope, for change, to take back our economy, to take back our power, and to take back our Senate seat. Throughout it all, you never turned your back on me, and I will not turn my back on you now. Every one of you deserves to see that vision come to fruition and see Susan.
You have not turned your back on me, which again, speaking to the calculation that was made here, which is that Graham Platner, with his rugged working class vibe and his agenda that is a true populist agenda to challenge the entrenched Republican power in Maine via Susan Collins, got to get Susan Collins out, that the calculation being voters will keep supporting no matter what. And then him being like, so I'm not going to turn my back on you now, when he is well aware of how many people in his volunteer Discord are saying, fuck you. Fuck you, drop out.
And Collins defeated. And we will use
the betrayal that this man did to not just the people who worked on his campaign, but to voters in Maine, who now he has put them in this situation where they showed that they were wanting change, that they were wanting to challenge the system, that they were wanting a candidate who really seemed to speak to working class politics. And now he has put them in this terrible spot cared about himself more than the movement. Exactly. And that's what happens with individuals like this, where they prioritize themselves over the actual movement, which tells you that they were never principled to begin with. Tells you that they never cared about the movement. It's like what, the other day when I had to talk about like how as representatives of the movement, whether you are commentators or running for office or whatever your role is, it can never be about you as an individual. It can never be about your own selfish fucking ego. And if it becomes more about you as an individual, then you need to exit.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
I don't know what I just clicked on.
I want non-consensual behavior is categorically false. Regardless.
Just tuning in. Did Jerry talk about McConnell? Yes, I said he's moved from low-key dead to high-key dead. In America, you can be dead and still be a powerful politician, still be in office. Avius, thank you for the prime. Modi, thank you for the 6 months. Biodrummer, thank you for the 16. Dowlick, thank you for the tier 1. Galtus, thank you for the 3 months.
Of the inaccuracy of the reporting, but mindful of the political reality it will inflict. We are taking the time to reflect.
Gotta say, I'm so happy you're talking about this from a female perspective. I was getting sick to my stomach reading so much of the discourse today, except for Sean's, of course. I mean, this is something that I have addressed many times, not specifically in relation to Graham Platner's campaign, but the issue of how a subset of leftists is, I would say in particular, ones who exist online, like primarily online, that they have moved away from intersectionality, if they were ever actually there in the first place, and have taken a slogan like "No war but class war" to mean that everything else is secondary, and secondary in a way that talking about it is a distraction. Talking about it is woke one. Talking about it is, hollow identity struggles. And if we keep focus on that, if we try and talk about racism and sexism and ableism and transphobia, that we are splitting ourselves apart and distracting from the main focus, which is class. And it is very Western centric, right? There's definitely the Western chauvinistic tendencies that always appear in these types of discussions. Like, it's not just a matter of, it's not just like whiteness, and it's not just maleness. There is a specific American centric problem. And that's how you end up claiming to care about black and brown folks, but not actually, because you don't have a problem with somebody who got paid to fuck their shit up. Just want my free healthcare and trains, bro.
The best path forward for the state that I love, the people that
It was the lack of account. Yeah, no, he never, what people need to understand, he never took accountability and apologized for the mercenary work. That was another aspect where it's like, hey, this is what I said repeatedly, is that I kept seeing people refuse to even pause, refuse to acknowledge the red flag here. And I think there was like misinformation around it, where there was this idea that he had taken accountability for his past. And so don't we as leftists believe in rehabilitation and yada, yada, yada. It's like, well, actually, no, that didn't even happen. That wasn't even the case. He really never apologized for it. So we're doing the thing where we are offering somebody redemption and rehabilitation without even the first step of taking accountability. You know, it's not hard to say, yes, I did that. I'm looking to be accountable. Others were doing that for him. Yes. So he didn't need to do that. And that's also what he was counting on.
I love the movement I belong to and the goal of defeating Susan Collins.
All right, let's go right to Aaron Zitner. He is a reporter and editor in the Wall Street Journal's Washington Bureau. Aaron, thanks for joining us. Let's talk about this. Platner has dealt with a number of controversies.
There's leftists that only signal support for marginalized people because it gives them legitimacy, but have no interest in being actual comrades in solidarity. Right. And here on the left, that is like, we do need to hold ourselves to the highest of standards. And I am tired of this. I am tired of this kind of cover for leftists from other leftists, where we should never be comparing ourselves to other parts of the political spectrum, because that is not what we believe in. The reason that we are on the left is because of our political views and our beliefs in like a true solidarity with the working class masses of the world.
Everything from a Nazi-linked tattoo to sexual misconduct allegations. Now this, can he salvage his campaign?
Well, I don't know the future, but I have to say it seems unlikely. You have three big problems. The first being that people who endorsed him, prominent people, Ruben Gallego, a senator from Arizona, Ro Khanna, a congressman from California, have rescinded their endorsements. And the party leadership, which wasn't really behind him to begin with, Chuck Schumer and the head of the Senate campaign committee for the party throughout the country.
I mean, this attitude of this is why we lose, which I have seen from folks on the left, of this is why we lose, woke one shit, identity politics. This is why we're never going to move forward, yada, yada, yada. And that is not just a terrible attitude to have, but one that comes at the expense of marginalized folks, where, hey, somebody who, like a Black woman who shares material conditions similar to that of a white man in America, has a different lived experience because of her experience with, say, the medical field, right? The historical misogynoir that is baked into the medical, our medical institutions. So pretending as if her that she is the same as a white man in this country because they are both members of the working class, because their material conditions are similar, it's wrong. It's wrong. And that is not how the approach should be. It's too narrow. And you're leaving people behind. I think Sean RFD said it best when they stated that people looking over his red flags was identity politics, but not being seen as so because he's white. Yeah, it's the way that identity politics are only applied to those of us who are not of the dominant groups, to those of us who do not have political power in equal ways or social power. Right? Where it's identity politics if somebody is trans and speaking about the experience of being trans, or somebody is Black or brown or a woman who, when we talk about, like, it's what's so crazy is the way that Marx and other Marxist, Leninist scholars and thinkers and leaders talked specifically about unpaid domestic labor and why capitalism relies on patriarchy to supply a constant chain of unpaid labor because of how domestic labor disproportionately falls on women and furthermore falls on Black and brown women, and how that is a steady supply of unpaid labor under a capitalist system.
Have called on him to drop out.
Victor Marx?
The Democratic Party of Maine, his home state, of course. So you have the party turning against him, and money is surely drying up if it hasn't already. It's going to be hard to raise money in this environment. And finally, you have the voters. And I've talked to plenty of Maine voters who already, he got more than 70% support in the Democratic primary, but a lot of people were still in kind of, we don't know everything about this person mode. And now you have a woman going on record on TV in a way that can be used in attack ads against him, saying that he's crossed the line into violent and non-consensual behavior. It seems.
Oh my God. Did you see Fetterman wants Bernie to apologize? Yeah. Talk about somebody who shouldn't talk, who should shut the fuck up and get the fuck out.
Helped him elect.
Of course, he's on Fox News.
Apologize to the victims, especially the woman that she claimed that he raped her.
Yeah, same guy who supports the systematic rape and torture and subjugation of Palestinians, which includes Palestinian women. Cares so much about women that he supports the actions of a state that is systematically subjugating them to every piece of oppression that that people can experience.
So I don't know why you want to keep pushing these kinds of people. Maybe he should consider set a few out and stop pushing these kind of communists and people. And now people, like P. Hustle, now he has been credibly accused of rape, and that's fairly recent too. That was only less than 5 years ago.
Well, he said that allegations are untrue, but that he's basically reviewing his options. He's obviously going to drop out, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I refuse to overlook that, but honestly, I would really call.
Thanks, Fetterman. Thanks for your thoughts on Fox News. Yep. I definitely believe intersectionality is critical as we build a broader coalition in the socialist movement. However, I also believe in rehabilitation. I'm trying to hold these ideas together and struggling a bit. So, namely, on the issue of rehabilitation, a person must take accountability in order to begin the process of rehabilitation. And also, rehabilitation does not mean then that somebody gets to have the same opportunities as another person who did not engage in the behavior that person going through rehabilitation did. So talking about political office, for example, where there is still this focus on, okay, we need to have room for people to have learned from their mistakes, taken accountability, and joined in this movement for real change. But I don't think that means that we should not still apply a critical lens to the people who we are electing as leaders of said movement. And I know that's not what you're saying either. And I get trying to hold all of this together. But I think with I think in the way that when we talk about Hollywood, for example, nobody has the right to be a professional actor, right? That is not something that is guaranteed to you. So if you are a person in the film industry who has done bad things, depending on what it is, right? Like if we're this is where it gets into the nuance on that, because not everything is also on the same level of on the same level. So sorry is the bare minimum. Yeah. I think we need to change our attitude on thinking that people are owed things or that they have a right to things. And that does not exist. So rehabilitation does not mean that then you have the right that you deserve to keep participating, to keep getting to do things that is not a right for anyone. No one is owed anything. So running for political office also is not something you necessarily have a right to, for the fact of having rehabilitated, where you can, there may be room for you in the movement, but as far as like being the person who is elected to lead, that's a different thing. Does that make sense? We keep getting caught up in individuals, and the whole point is the movement. Yes. And if you are an individual who your individuality will be a threat to the overall movement, then that's a problem. But also, Graham Platner never apologized for a lot of the bad things in his past and was offered redemption regardless.
It's really hard to dig out from this.
So with endorsements withdrawn, are people calling for Platner to drop out? And what happens with the Maine Senate race and Democrats' efforts to unseat Susan Collins?
Yes, well, the state party and other Democratic leaders have called on him to drop out. And
continue to lie. Yes, and continue to lie. Yes, we were kind of talking a bit more generally, but to go specifically back to Graham Platner, the fact that this man never took into consideration that the movement was bigger than him, is bigger than him, should be bigger than him, speaks to his narcissism, speaks to the fact that he didn't care.
Controlling vehicle here, and it doesn't give the Democratic Party much time. It's up to Graham Platner on whether to withdraw, but he must withdraw by next Monday in order for the party to replace him on the ballot. If he doesn't withdraw by next Monday, he can remove his name from the ballot, but the party doesn't have the right to put in a substitute person. So by next Monday, if he withdraws,
and it's also him not withdrawing further shows that people were right to be alarmed by somebody like him in the first place, you know? Like, it's not just everything that's happened in between and everything that happened before. It's if he refuses to drop at this point, it's just further proof that he was never somebody who should have been put forward in the first place.
The party then has 2 weeks to pick a replacement, and that would fall to the Democratic State Committee, the Democratic Party of Maine, the the state committee.
All right. Aaron Zittner. Aaron, thank you.
Absolutely.
I wanted to direct.
It's also maybe time to chill on some of this dark woke shit, because I just think it makes people look really foolish.
Well,
Making you look like a fool. Okay. Thought this was a good take. Platner is an example of both the failure of the Dem establishment to field a competent candidate and the consequences of progressive populism untethered from an organization like DSA that can responsibly vet and develop cadre candidates over years to run for office. Yeah, and to be clear, he was never a part of DSA. Like, he was not a DSA candidate. He is not attached to DSA.
welcome back. Political strategist time, isn't it exciting? Democratic strategist Amisha Cross, Republican strategist, former chief of staff to Vice President Mike Pence. Mark
So
Short.
exciting.
All right, folks, I told you we would continue to update you on the Graham Platner story. Here is another update from Ruben Gallego. We have a graphic. Please bring it up, control room. The allegations against Graham Platner.
Has Bernie said anything yet? Not that I have seen. I know others have withdrawn their recommendations. I gotta say, it was very smart of AOC to not get involved on that race. Yeah, AOC all of a sudden not so silly for not endorsing. Yeah. Oh, Ro Khanna and Ruben Gallego withdrew their Platner endorsements. You know, it's so interesting too. So interesting to see the difference in how PodSafe bros talk about Graham Platner, even in the aftermath of this recent rape claim. Even post this woman sharing the sexual assault experience that she had from Graham Platner, to still see the way that the Pod Johns treat a Graham Platner versus Daria Lisa. And it's like, do you want to be on the same side as the Pod Johns here? Recent Pod John tweet. Platner needs to drop out ASAP. These are awful, credible allegations said on the pod after the also credible June NYT story that his biggest problem going forward would be credibility. It's now abundantly clear that he just hasn't been honest about his past and can't be trusted as a candidate for office. Saving grace is that the party can find a replacement by the 27th as long as he drops by the 13th, which I very much assume he will. Notice that John doesn't have the word I in there like he did with Daria Lisa, where he said, I just still have a problem with how she hasn't apologized for January 8th. I just think I have a problem with that. I have a problem with this woman, this black Muslim woman, not getting on her hands and knees to apologize for protesting Israel the day after October 7th. What did I say? Did I say January 8th? Oh, you guys don't remember January 8th? Y'all don't remember January 8th? Y'all, okay. Just me? Just me, I guess. January 8th, never forget. January 8th. Did anything happen on January 8th? Never forget. Wow. Yeah. Graham Platner isn't just our best and only chance to beat Susan Collins. He's a good, decent man who's struggled and grown and is always trying to do better. Just very telling the double standard that John Favs perpetuates here in the way that he talks about Graham Platner versus the way that he talks about Daria Lisa Chevalier. Not to absolve AOC of her faults, but I always found it weird when some leftists immediately attack her for not giving an endorsement as soon as the campaign starts. Like, she's presumably going to go after Schumer. She's absolutely going to be 300% cautious. I think sometimes people take like legit criticisms of AOC and then apply that to every single decision that she makes. There's kind of this assumption that everything she's doing is via her position as an actual op. Like, I just think there's kind of this idea that AOC is a secretive, not so secretive op. And so every position, every decision, every not doing something has no good purpose to it. And it's just all in service of her being an op. God, I just can't stand Jon Favreau. I can't stand him. Can't stand John Lovett crying about Scott Wiener. Scott Wiener, who was the victim of an anti-Semitic attack because trans activists told him to get the fuck out. And the thing is that John Lovett took that personally. Because John Lovett heavily identifies with Scott Wiener. He sees himself very much in a Scott Wiener. So attacks on Scott Wiener are attacks on someone like John Lovett. So he took it personally. Yeah, he's a liberal Zionist. He is gay. He is Jewish. He is a liberal Zionist. And him watching that clip of Scott Wiener being yelled at by trans activists who don't view solidarity as transactional. Shout out to the trans activists who do not view solidarity as transactional and instead saw Scott Wiener for the Zionist that he is and said, we don't give a fuck that you're here at the trans rally, at the trans march, because you are not an ally. They demonstrated how intersectionality works, where, yes, trans rights are under attack in this country. And yes, plenty of Democrats have thrown trans people and trans rights under the fucking bus as they've moved more to the right. But the trans activists at that march did not view Scott Wiener as like, okay, well, at least he's here. At least he's one of the Democrats that we can count on to be supporting trans rights. No. They thought of their Palestinian siblings. They thought of what is, important here in real solidarity, which is that a threat to justice anywhere is a threat, and justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, where we cannot stand here and accept somebody who is good on trans rights in America, because don't forget, there are trans Palestinians too. Okay, it is not just about it is not just about like good on trans rights. It's trans rights in America while ignoring trans lives in Palestine, ignoring all Palestinian lives. Anyway,
Platner are troubling and deeply serious. I am rescinding my endorsement.
Water.
Democratic Senator from Arizona, Ruben Gallego. So I'm pretty sure this looks like it's over.
Yeah, I think that the statement that was released by Platner earlier kind of opened the door to it possibly being over. He only has a short, I think it's what, the 15th or the 16th?
13th.
That he has, the 13th, okay, shorter than that he has to make that decision. But
whenever a politician talks about exploring the path forward, there's no path forward.
The other
Do we agree on that as professionals?
Yeah. He's had multiple allegations before, but none of them rose to the extent of an accusation of rape.
And as you know,
that's the same thing that happened with Eric Swalwell. Once you get to that, it's about to be over.
And as you know, lots of Democrats who had endorsed with him
Exclamation point, water.
Privately,
yeah, everybody hydrate.
That's the line. And if it's serious and credible, I'm not going to be there. Mark, you're shaking your head.
Well, the Nazi tattoo is okay.
What do you think instantly interrupts her?
Okay. The trafficking on apps that you're basically sex trafficking young girls was okay.
So curious your thoughts. Oh, well, my thoughts are, yeah, that's great. So here's what I think.
The initial sexual allegations were okay, but we drew the line there. I mean, what is the line, really? So I think you're seeing a lot of Democrats walk back, but they sure were a lot of comfortable with a lot of things.
Penn Stab, thank you for the prime. Timple's hairline, thank you for 34
does it
months.
fundamentally alter that Senate race?
I think dramatically.
Susan Collins is now the odds-on favorite.
I would think so. Look, I always thought that she was, because people always discount.
What if Janet Mills comes back in, which she could? Sitting governor, two-term elected?
I think that probably where you are in this moment is an anti-establishment moment. I don't know that Janet Mills really fills that void to say, hey, I'm somehow an outsider here.
Amisha?
Yeah, I think that Mark's right on that. At this point, we know that, Democrats, the establishment wanted a more moderate candidate anyway. Clearly, that's not what Democrats.
She is so horrible. Abdul said, credible allegations of sexual assault cannot be ignored. Voters in Maine deserve a choice for U.S. Senate that doesn't force them to make a moral compromise between sexual violence or corporate servitude. Abdul, are you having trouble stringing two sentences together? I believe women. Graham Platner should drop out. Girl, that doesn't even work. Like, are you drunk? That's not the clapback you think it is, because he's not saying Graham Platner is innocent. You can't pull out the line and be like, gotcha. Can you read? Can you read? My God, you're actually only proving his point that he had made previously, which is that you can't string two sentences together because you're a corporation in a suit. She is laughably, comically bad. And Mallory McMorrow has dropped out because she was polling so piss poor low. She had 0% with black voters despite her very cringe antics. So shocked to see she was polling at 0% with black voters. I can't believe that the cutouts of her face and her doing her white woman dancing with the marching band didn't work.
Voters wanted. So at this point, if he is to step down, which I think that he will,
no one from her parade voted for her.
The voters did not choose. It is going to be somebody who is somebody who they, it may be her, may not be her, but anybody who comes up is somebody who they did not roundly choose themselves. That was part of the argument that several Democrats had with Kamala Harris. At the end of the day, folks like to know that they chose somebody in the primary. And unfortunately, this information did not come out before votes were cast. So now they're going to be stuck in a very tough position. And it could depress the Democratic vote entirely.
Before the Graham Platner news broke via Politico, we would have started our conversation about something else that happened over the weekend with Mallory McMorrow, who dropped out of the Senate Democratic primary in Michigan and did so with a statement. Let's run that.
I haven't been shy about calling for new leadership and a better Democratic Party. I mean it. The energy is there. People are crying out for change. Whoever wins this primary on August 4th will have my full support. It
was a three-way race. Now it's two. How do you assess it?
She
McMahon
means
started
it.
very strong. And
She
I think that
means
midway
it.
through her...
the fact that she hasn't even apologized to Abdul for the shit she said about him, of course not. Why would she apologize for the racist shit that she said? She meant that.
Through her campaign, she listened to a whole bunch of D.C. consultants who took her in the wrong direction.
She dropped out to give more of the vote to Stevens. Well, it's not much.
Everything to everybody and became nothing to no one. So you had a lane that she started in that I think was more progressive, that was more leaning towards putting the building back together.
Dr. Abdul El-Sayed now has that lane.
And then he grabbed it. And it was over. Her fundraising never really eclipsed to where it needed to be. And at that point, it kind of just became...
Mallory tried a mythical third option. She tried to be the Goldilocks option.
Mute. She honestly, in my estimation, she should have dropped out weeks ago because there was no real path forward.
It's now Haley Stevens and Dr. El-Sayed. How do you assess it?
El Sayed is likely going to be the Democratic nominee. I don't see an avenue where he is not at this point. He has shown himself to not only be formidable, but to also draw that line between the buzzword of the day as people are focusing in on affordability, but also the frustration that many folks have in Michigan and across the country about the consistent spending on the war in Iran, as well as the ongoing war in Palestine.
And Mark Short, you know that Mike Rogers is the Republican nominee in Michigan, ran, nearly won. Yeah. How do you assess the race now?
Look, I think that Republicans in Michigan have had a hard time finding a way to win when Trump is not at the top of the ticket. So I still think it's going to be tough. I think it's a tough climate. But wow, it's been a really difficult 48 hours for Senate Democrats. And I think that it's clear that they're looking and hoping by getting this candidate out that they'll be rallying the establishment around Stevens. But she's run a pretty...
Also, by the way, Michael Tracy, who's one of the Epstein defenders on Twitter, constantly smearing Epstein's victims, is, of course, calling Resicott a liar. So just saying that as far as those who are still standing by Graham Platner, you're on the same side as Michael Tracy. Maxine Waters assaulted me, Tracy. "84-year-old Maxine Walters assaulted me, Michael Tracy."
Miserable, lackluster campaign. So I think that national Democrats are concerned about how progressive they are, particularly with all the rise of the Democrat socialist candidates.
When you look at this midterm, there was a narrative developing about a month ago that most of the wins were favorably behind the backs of Democrats, wherever you were. Do you detect in any way that's shifting?
I still think that the wind is behind Democrats. I think that a midterm is going to be a referendum on the party in power. And when you have, president in the mid-30s and approval ratings, I think that's really difficult. But having said that, this has been a really bad couple days for Senate Democrats.
And you add to that the Supreme Court decision on independent expenditure money, which is going to net, at least for this cycle, help Republicans?
I think maybe, Major. I'm less convinced on the benefits. I think the reality is that I've always been a proponent that people should be allowed to get what they want as long as it's fully disclosed.
And it's message and environment more than money that determines the outcome in every election.
Yes.
You know that.
Maybe my algorithms are goated. I have yet to see anyone defending Platner after this bullshit. Oh, I've seen Chank put out at least 10 tweets. Classic. Unsurprising.
I know that both. Misha Cross, great stuff. Mark Short, you're always welcome here. Great to have you.
I'm sure Anna is supporting as well. Those two. Those two. I will say, appreciate people who have said that they were wrong, and I appreciate how you've tackled this topic to a point. I understand the original need to give him the benefit of the doubt on certain things because of what he could represent. It's been very depressing seeing how openly vile some people on the left have been, both on social media and other Twitch chats, flatly calling any accusation a lit or laughing off worries about the tattoo is lib shit. Yeah, it fucking annoys the shit out of me how everything just gets called rad lib shit, right? I get called a rad lib. What people will try to hold on over me is the fact that I was once a liberal, while ironically going, Graham Platner has changed. I'm like, that's so funny. That's so funny that I will still see comments about how Caroline Kwan is a rad lib still, that she was once a liberal. I'm like, oh, it's okay. Interesting. Yeah, interesting who you are willing to allow to progress in their politics and change, and who you're not. Okay. But yeah, it's the utilizing the term lib, rad lib, to dismiss any and all valid criticisms. And it was even just people being like, well, hold on a second. If now is not if maybe not on this one, but going forward, like, can we have higher considerations higher standards for who we have representing our movement. Like, can we even have that conversation or no? Nothing. Yeah, I think it's really not cool. But do you stand with her still? But do you stand with her? Are you still with her? Were you a never Platner, or did you always suspect something was up? I from the get-go was like, y'all, I think there are some flags here, and I think we shouldn't just be steamrolling over the concerns and the concerns and the hesitations. I did not publicly endorse, not that it's like, not that I'm like, if there's no public, you know what I mean? It's not a like, I don't even, it's not even really a thing that I do. I'm not like, yes, here's my public endorsement. I recognize, like, yes, his platform is a hell of a lot better than Susan Collins. Susan Collins is terrible and needs to be removed. I thought it was something that was lacking nuance in the online discourse regarding Graham Platner and his past. I think it's okay if early on you didn't immediately discard him, but like you had to be cautious and wait to see what happened. And I'm not here to throw stones. And I'm not here to shame people who were obviously desiring a removal of Susan Collins from power. And I said, all right, it's up to the people of Maine, and they supported him in the primary, right? He won. But I think this is I mean, it's always the larger conversation. I'm sure people are like, oh, here she goes again. But it is, right? It is the broader conversation and reckoning that needs to be had. And I am always a person who is going to approach I'm always going to have my approach be one that is rooted in intersectionality. I am never going to dismiss the importance of an intersectional class approach. So the fact that a lot of people are dismissing intersectionality, whether it's in regards to this or whatever else, is where I see a big problem. Shows how desperate people feel that they're willing to overlook the things that came out of Graham. Right. And a reminder that it was not about Graham. It's about the needs of the working class. And that's why it can never be about an individual. It has to be about the entire movement and the actual coalition of the working class. So a reminder that it was not that people were excited by Graham Platner, the person, but Graham Platner, his agenda that speaks to voters' needs, right? The people of Maine who heard the things that he was advocating for and went, yes. So the idea that it could have only been Graham is no. Even the victim was afraid to come forward to derail the message. Right. Where she's like, okay, he's the guy. He's the guy. And I believe in the things he's saying, as do a lot of people. Like, this is what we want. But as a person, he has caused great harm to me and to others. Another crazy part about this is if he were running as Republican or establishment Dem, none of this would matter. That we would never even know about it. Just shows political state. Well, yeah, I mean, considering you got people like Victor fucking Marx over in Colorado. Victor. Oh. He had a special effect on white boomers, though, that was a valuable asset because of his background. He seemed more legitimate to them. Sure. I'm not denying that him being a burly white dude who appeared to represent this very narrow version of a working class hero, right? A defender of the working class. I'm not denying that did not have appeal for people, but what we need to focus on is not the idea that somebody who looks like Graham Platner is more, the look of him, the aesthetic is more important than who the person is. I mean, that's why you have the Podjons having a very different tone with somebody like Graham Platner versus Daria Lisa. Someone tried to tell me people don't have a problem with idolizing white men because we have Zoran and AOC. What? I don't understand. My hot take I've always stood on 10 toes about is even if it were false allegations, statistically not as common, I still would be against whoever it is because I'd rather be against someone who may have abused someone than ever risk supporting an abuser. I just, again, point to the constant smears and attacks on people like Zoran and Abdul al-Sayed and how they have not been able to get anything, right? They have not been able to dig up even the faintest of claims. So I don't necessarily agree with that, but I don't think that that's really the way to look at it. Sorry, what Chatter said, not what I just said. I think what Platner voters are afraid of is the Democratic Party not being able to find a replacement that will motivate Platner's coalition to go out and vote blue. In the general, it seems like Troy Jackson is the only viable replacement for Platner, and I think Dem leadership doesn't want anyone with Platner's policy platform like Jackson. Yeah, he's the only name that I have seen as a viable option here. He has until July 13th to withdraw, and if he does, the state Democratic Party has until July 27th to replace him on the ticket. The leadership of the state party urged him to withdraw. Both parties see Maine as key to the battle for control of the Senate, and prominent Democrats withdrew their endorsements of him after the allegations surfaced. The Senate Democratic campaign arm, which had opposed Platner in the primary, called for him to quit the race. Graham Platner needs to immediately withdraw as the Democratic nominee for Senate and allow Maine Democrats the opportunity to choose a new candidate who can defeat Susan Collins. From Chucky Schumer and Kirsten Gillibrand, the DSCC will not invest in the Maine Senate race if Platner remains on the ballot. Some of his key supporters called for him to drop as well, including Senator Elizabeth Warren, who had championed his bid. There can be no tolerance for sexual assault. With so much at stake, the best path forward is for Graham Platner to step aside as the Democratic nominee and address these serious allegations outside the Senate race. Representative Ro Khanna, a California Democrat who had been another key backer, also withdrew his support. These allegations are very serious and credible. Graham Platner should drop out. I am withdrawing my endorsement. There are some indications that he may be contemplating an exit. He has not made a decision on whether to drop out, according to a person familiar with the campaign's internal discussions, who added that there was no guarantee he would drop out even as Democrats abandoned his campaign. If he was to step down, it would only be with a guarantee of being replaced by a candidate who he believes is true to the values and vision and policy agenda of the campaign that Maine voted for, said the person who was granted anonymity because they were not authorized to speak about the discussions publicly. Maine Dems statement requesting for Graham to withdraw. Maine Democratic Party leadership takes seriously our responsibility to hold every candidate who seeks to represent our state to the highest standard. Over the past several weeks, multiple women have made serious, credible allegations against Graham Platner. Today's statements take those allegations even further. Maine Democratic Party leadership is calling on Graham Platner to withdraw as the Democratic nominee for U.S. Senate. The Maine Democratic Party leadership stands with women and survivors, and the principle does not bend on party affiliation. We respect the women who made the hard decision to come forward. Speaking up is often costly. We are entrusted with deciding who represents our values and who carries our banner. That responsibility requires judgment, leadership, and a willingness to act when circumstances demand it. The Senate race comes at a pivotal moment in the struggle against a government supported by Senator Collins that serves the interests of the wealthy and powerful at the expense of ordinary Maine people. It is essential we refocus this campaign on that struggle. This is from our Revolution. This is their statement. Following the most recent credible reporting regarding allegations of sexual assault against Graham Platner, our Revolution is withdrawing its endorsement of his U.S. Senate campaign in Maine and calling on him to withdraw from the race. From the executive director, we were proud to endorse Graham Platner's campaign. It engaged thousands of working people in Maine around a simple idea that Maine's Senate seat should belong to its people, not corporate donors. Medicare for all, an end to corporate money in our politics, an end to handing this country's leaders a blank check for forever wars, and a Democratic Party that actually answers to the people it claims to represent, not the donors who fund it. That was never really about one candidate. It was about what Mainers ultimately wanted and deserved, a Senate seat that answers to them. Everyone deserves a fair and open process, and Graham Platner is entitled to due process like anyone else. But the allegations against him are credible, and at this point, they are too serious to treat as a distraction from the campaign or the issues. Sexual violence is a red line. We are withdrawing our endorsement and calling on him to withdraw from this race. To the Democratic establishment, this is not your opening. Mainers did not vote by an overwhelming margin against Janet Mills and the DSCC's handpicked candidate just to be handed another status quo candidate. They deserve what they voted for. Whoever leads this movement forward must be someone who has actually lived the fight that Graham Platner ran on, a record with working people, with unions, against corporate money, already tested and trusted by the same base that delivered this result. Maine has that leader already in this race. The movement will settle for nothing less because that is what Mainers deserve. I wonder what Ryan Grimm, Cristobal, and Kyle Kalinske are going to be saying tomorrow since they went all in on Platner. I know that Emma posted a video that said she no longer supports him and that he should drop out. I think Ryan Grimm had. I think all three of them have said that they're not supporting him anymore and that he should drop out. Ro said this about Troy Jackson. Troy is somebody who has spent his life standing up for these progressive values. The movement is about standing for Medicare for all, opposing foreign wars, and getting money out of politics. Yeah, so he is a former state senator. He's being floated as a potential replacement who could appeal to the progressive base that backed Platner. So he was formerly the Maine Senate president, and he won the governor's race, but lost the primary to Hannah Pingree. He supported Platner on the campaign trail and received the endorsement of Bernie Sanders, but it's not clear that he would be interested in running for Senate. LGBT sound system, thank you for the 13 months. It's been reported that he is interested. Yeah, he's DSA. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. We got to do, but in conclusion, we got to do better than no war but class war, if that means a complete dismissal to having an intersectional approach, because it's leaving people behind. It's ignoring the everyday ways that other pillars of oppression influence people's lives. That's my take.